I am here. Good morning.
Good to have you on. Thank you. Okay, we have a quorum, and let's get started. Say welcome to everyone. Appreciate you being available. This is, I guess, our fourth meeting, the 2nd February, and I do appreciate everybody making time in their schedules to accommodate an extra meeting, and I think we will be in extra meeting mode for a while. That's one of the things we'll talk about when we get to the third item on the agenda. I've tried to speak one-on-one with every commissioner since our last meeting, and I've been successful. Scott and I have missed each other, but we will catch up. And I can just tell you, I hope I've ended every conversation with this because it's the way I feel. It's really a privilege to serve with such a terrific group of people and distinguished and experienced commissioners, and I'm really looking forward to our moving forward. And I want to thank everybody for their good ideas, and Dan particularly for suggesting that we have a commissioner-only discussion, so to speak, today's meeting after Rose's completion of her presentation and our questions of her. I hope we'll have a good discussion and really get ourselves sorted out as we move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Rose Butler.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. And if anyone could be so kind and let me know if they can see it.
See it?
Got it.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right. So last meeting, we didn't get too far into this presentation, but we were focusing on call contracts, non-competitive procurements, and procurement cards. And within this presentation, we are going to discuss, master agreements, on-call contracting, pre-qualification process, contract administration, non-competitive procurements, and procurement cards. Let me say this, I added a few slides because the last time we had some meetings, I did notice that there were some comments in the chat box asking me to expand on some things. So I tried to go back and expand on those things, and we can have a little bit more lengthier discussion. And then I also included purchasing. Bear with me, I have like 3 monitors up, so I have to move this one to the side here. Purchasing personnel. So master agreement versus on-call contracts. So master agreements are generated from on-call contracts. It's just, master agreements is just the document, the terminology we use in our current Advantage ERP system. Both the master agreement and on-call contracts are initially established for repetitive type commodities and or services at a firm fixed price. So those things that we know we're going to need on a frequent basis, and those services that we're going to need, weekly, monthly, this is when we get into the master agreements or the on-call contracts. The main difference between the two is that the on-call contracts mostly, majority of the time, focus on services and not goods. So some of the services are like the skilled trade services, carpentry, plumbing, painting, welding, things of that nature. Professional services, which was covered by Department of Public Works the last time we had our presentation. Maintenance services, which is mostly handled by our property management department, and then any other services needed for the upkeeping of the county's buildings. Master agreements, sometimes they do have services, but they're not, those things that we use all the time. But master agreements most of the time focus on, goods, parts, things of that nature. On-call contracts are issued for hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry again. Okay, there we go. On-call contracts are issued for a period of time. It's our standard term period to have a 1-year base term and 4-year renewal options. There may be some times where the option or the base year and the option years are longer, depending on the service or the procurement. But for the most part, everything is mostly 1 year with 4 1-year renewal increments, renewal options.
Rose, this is Phil. If I could interrupt you just for a second.
Sure.
We having this PowerPoint, it's very nicely organized, and having all this information is great. One of the things that we asked all the commissioners to do is to take a chance and go through it, so we can make a most efficient use of your time. And I am going to, my conversations, I'm going to assume that all the commissioners have had a chance to look at it. So what I'd like to do is as we go through go through each slide, I'd really like people to have an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
But I also want to be mindful of your time and then the time of the commission for the discussion later. So I had a question about on-call contracts, and I'm just wondering if what we might do is questions as we go along, but just, we'll use the heading on each page as sort of the next headline, and if people have questions, great. If not, we could just move through it that way. Because I think that might be helpful. I know commissioners have a lot of questions, and I'll exercising a point of privilege as the chair, I'll ask the first one. In terms of the on-call contracts, as I'm looking on the second page, it says there are 150 on-call contracts, 1,200 active master agreements. How often is that list for both of those? How often are they reviewed, culled, changed? I'm wondering how people are, how entities who are on these lists stay qualified. Also wondering what the opportunities are for smaller businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses to get on the list. If you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so sure. So the master agreement, these 1,200 active master agreements, they are a combination of, commodities or goods and services. So they're not all on-call contracts. For those on-call contracts that have pre-qualification attached to them, that's another process. So how they get on that list is when we put out the solicitation. If that category falls within one of those pre-qualification categories, then they must submit their pre-qualification application, I believe, within 10 days prior to the due date of the solicitation. In reference to like how the vendors get on the list, this list is just composed of those vendors who have been awarded agreement. So in order to be a part of that, they would have to respond to the actual solicitation at the time it's solicited. Hopefully that answers your question. Did I miss one of, it's in reference to the small business or minority business, that is part of the solicitation process before we even solicit the contract. It goes through Carla's team, through the PRG, and they determine whether a goal should be assigned to that solicitation or not.
And if I could follow up just for a second, and thank you for your answer. How is it determined that some particular category of goods or services belongs in the on-call category or the master agreement category?
So that's a great question. Now, in reference, and let me just say this, I'm referring to section 14 of our purchasing manual, just, for everyone can, look at that. But in reference to the pre-qualification or how those categories are set, that's going to be set according to DPW and the purchasing agent, which is our director of budget and finance. So my office, OBF Purchasing, we don't have any involvement in the process of what categories are deemed categories for pre-qualification or not.
And I know there've been some questions and conversations I've had with commissions about how many pre-qualified firms would fall under the MBE or DBE category. Do you know?
I would not know. That would be something that DPW will pull because they maintain that pre-qualification vendor list. So I'm not sure if they have a report. That may be something we can reach out and ask them to pull a report together, Jasmine, with all of their vendors and what vendors are certified and not certified.
And that's actually something we're working on right now
Okay.
because MDOT, I believe it's MDOT, has a master list of all the pre-qualified and the categories, so we can cross-reference with what we have. So the plan is to have as much as this data available in advance of our March MBE meeting.
And Mr. Andrews, if I can insert this, I just want to make sure that I put this out here, is that there are actually two departments that have procurement functions. You have DPW, and they put out their own solicitation for capital improvement related contracts. And then you have the OBF purchasing. So some of the things I would definitely be able to answer, but then some things, when it really gets down deep into the pre-qualification, I'll be able to speak on what I can, and some of the other stuff, you may have to pull some of the agencies back into, that conversation.
Understood. Thank you. That's very helpful. And Jasmine, I know that Scott sent a list of questions in on the on-call and the pre-qualification aspects of procurement done in the county, and I assume we're gathering that information. Am I right about that?
We are.
Great. Good.
Excuse me, Phil. I didn't see, I don't think I saw Scott's questions. I also sent in a couple of questions, and I know Dan did as well.
Yes. And right. And I think, right, I don't think Scott's, we'll get Scott's questions to everybody. But Dan and Peter, if you have questions at this point for Butler on this topic, let's go ahead.
Mine come on a later slide.
Yep.
Okay. Do you want me to move forward to that side or just wait?
Well, let's just take them in order. Peter, was there anything on the master agreement on-call contracts particularly you'd like to cover now?
Well, one of the, and I'm not sure this is a question for Rose based on her statement just a minute ago, but with regard to purchasing of services, which are often on the agenda for the county council, which is where I tend to see them. I gave an example of a recent contract awarded. This happened to have been for marijuana testing services. And I was concerned that the process whereby the contract was actually initiated before council approval was not complying with County Charter Section 715. And I wondered, because in other lives, this approach would have been described as splitting, as a strategy to work around the actual procurement requirements. And so I was wondering if I am misreading this or if the law office can provide some clarity.
So Susan, I think you on a call, did you want me to take a stab at this, or you wanted to, want me to take and then you jump in, or?
I'm not familiar with that contract per se, but is it a situation where there's language that says it will not exceed $25,000 without council approval?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but that's with stipulation as it's written in the code, less than $25,000. But if it's more than $25,000 and for a year or more, then it requires council approval. And this
Exactly.
contract, according to the auditors, for the first year was estimated to be $116,881 for the initial 1-year term of what is structured to be a 5-year and 3-month contract.
Right, so we have, because of the exigent nature of some of these contracts and, complications with COVID, things like that, the county administrative officer has authority to spend up to $25,000 or enter into an agreement for under 2 years without council approval. And with an on-call contract, they can do some work that falls under that dollar figure. So in order not to have things delayed, we have occasionally used that. We try not to use that language if we can avoid it. But that's the basis for that. I understand the concern. It's sort of a nuanced area, but that's the position that the prior administration had always taken.
Well, just a point of clarification. This contract happened to have been for the police department. They've been using this and other companies for on-call services for many years. And so either between purchasing and the police department, they can't keep track of when their contracts are going to expire because there was an existing contract. So this is not COVID related in any way.
Okay, as I said, I'm not familiar with this particular one, and I do know that purchasing does keep a list of expiration dates and notifies the agencies. What is it, Rose, between 6 months and a year before?
Correct. And the
So, yeah.
Yep, and the master agreements are, updated on our webpage as well for, our departments and, any external customers to take a look at to see when the contract expires. So,
And you have said that before, and I do understand that that is the system that's set up.
Sure.
But this situation occurs over and over again before COVID and after COVID, where it's well known that this is expected to be a on-call or master agreement type contract, often with a contractor that's been providing the services for a number of years already. And so how is it that there's all of a sudden this rush to start a new contract before council approval? I don't want to belabor the fact here, but I raised the issue.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's a valid point.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm not familiar with this particular contract, but that has been something that we have become aware of.
I can give you many, many examples.
I'm sure you can.
And that was, and to that point, that's why I added that slide at the end. I wanted to talk about the purchasing personnel and, the buyers in correlation with the work demand or, the amount of procurements that come through the office, which I'm definitely sure has something to do with, the delays and not, turn around things as quickly as we could be. So we could have.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I believe that, your automated system for letting people know dates and everything is the right strategy. So, and it may well be that the load on purchasing is more than can be handled in as timely a manner as you might wish. But I don't think that the decision process by the agencies is the responsibility of purchasing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there
Just a
other?
quick, I just have a quick question about, so you have approximately over 1,200 active master agreements. Is your solid waste with the private industry under a master agreement? I'm just curious.
The current
No,
one,
some example.
I'm sorry, the current one, yes, ma'am.
And because this is one of the issues that we've been hearing now for years, where it goes back centuries of particular companies that have access to solid waste. And if you're not part of this family of companies, then it's difficult to get in. So how do you evaluate or assess, and how long are these master agreements? Just using that one as one example.
Are you referring to the individual haulers?
I'm talking about the the solid waste that you do to your residents.
Right, so that's the haulers that pick up the trash as opposed to the
Yes.
companies that, yeah. That was provided for in the code. It's an exception. And I don't know that we have master agreements for those.
I think we do. I double check. I think
Do we? I don't know.
I
Do
currently,
you know how that worked?
in the past, I do not, because
I was wondering if
Yeah.
Steve Walsh,
oh,
Yeah, I
sorry.
can chime in. So
Yeah.
we shouldn't use that particular example in any discussion. I know the administration has another work group that's discussing the solid waste hauler and those contracts and how that works. So that's definitely an outside of the box, out of the norm process. So I think the question is good about how the overall process works, but that particular one,
Right.
yeah, that's not a normal one.
So I was going to say the same thing. This county administrative officer is currently running a work group around all of the solid waste issues. We can put a link in the chat. I'll do it in a minute to what's transpired thus far in that group. And I'm sure she would be happy to brief the commission on that particular area. But then as everyone has said in response, there's a general question on the table that clearly should be either answered now or put on the, to be further discussed.
And sorry about that, Ms. Dixon. I couldn't answer that question all the way because definitely is a topic, as you can tell, that's being discussed.
So are there other master agreement topics similar to the solid waste that are in that same situation, or?
Not that I know of.
No,
unless-
there are not
yeah.
other work groups on master agreements, which is why this is, for all others other than solid waste, this would be the venue to ask and just continue to understand and flesh out what you've raised. So we should put it on the list if it's not there already.
This is Peter. Another question I had along the lines of trash hauling is snow removal. There are also master agreements on snow removal that have been a mystery to me.
So snow removals, I'm sorry, Susan. Okay, snow removals are part of that. So back to that, Ms. Dixon. Yes, when you ask if there are others, yes, snow removal contracts is another one of the master agreements that fall into that section. And I can talk about that process a little bit more in depth if you would like me to.
I'm sorry, is snow removal lumped in with trash removal? Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of like that same process where it's one of the exceptions that Susan had mentioned earlier, where the purchasing agent approves those contracts.
Well, we have set prices for the types of equipment and hours and things like that. And anyone who is qualified can enter into an agreement with the county.
Correct.
So we do have agreements with our snow hauler. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the process I was.
It is
going to
different
explain.
than the solid waste.
Okay.
But it doesn't fall into the traditional procurement process.
How so?
Well, as Susan mentioned, the vendors come, if a vendor is interested in becoming a snow removal contractor, then there are certain criteria that they must, fit, and as well as their vehicles have to be able to withstand the outfitting for the big old shovels that goes in front of them. And then that is sent upstairs to our purchasing agent to review and approve. So most of these master agreements that we have, they go through some sort of solicitation process, and this one is one of the ones that are exception. Susan, I see your screen up. I didn't know if you had something to.
I was just saying,
Yeah.
this is open to anyone on a continuing basis if they have the qualifications and are interested,
And that's
So-
probably
so
why,
as opposed to putting out specific solicitations.
correct. And that's why our snow removal contract list is very long.
So it's not a qualifications or bid process.
No.
Okay.
Now-
No, we set the prices, and
Mhm.
if they meet the qualifications and can provide the insurance and have the equipment, they can get on the list.
Can't get on the list.
We
So,
want
but
as
why
many
don't
people
you do it
available
through
as
a bid?
possible.
Yeah, why don't you do it through a bid process even with those criterias? I mean, I know the city does it through a bid process, and I believe the state does.
I don't think we've needed to because we have a large list.
Yeah, but who decides who plows? I may have a large list through all of,
Public Works, I believe assigns the routes.
Correct.
so I could be listed, I could be approved, but I might not get a phone call to do work.
That is a possibility.
So how is that fair?
Steve, I hate to ask you to jump in again, but
Yeah.
am I correct that there are routes that are assigned to people, and if we have snow then, or ice, then they get the call?
So just a real quick little background, the current process developed over the course of time like everything else. So there was a big storm many, many years ago, and the county needed additional resources and did not have contracts in place. So what happened during that time frame, and I was not involved in the snow removal process then, was that any person with a dump truck and a plow was being used by either the state highway, private individuals, or the county, and they were trying to find resources, and those resources were very scarce. So what happened after that is they realized they need to have folks under contract to be able to assist the county during these periods of extreme storms. So the contracting process, they had a list of folks that they had used and procured during those bigger storms. They started out with that list, and over the course of time, folks would come to the county and say, "Hey, I have some equipment. I think we can help you," and they would go through this process, which Rose is identifying, where they agree to be paid a certain amount, which matches state highway. Again, state highway has contract resources, the county has contract resources, and there was a period of time when the state highway would pay more than the county, and the county could not get supplemental resources. So they worked a deal out where those payments are the same, and they never went through a broad bidding process. Once again, it's sort of developed over the course of time. We had that base list that was generated after that storm many years ago, and it has been supplemented over the course of time. Now, what also happens is people do not have the same equipment, right? So it's a long list of equipment, and if you're a small landscape contractor, you might have one piece of equipment. So it is very possible that the county would not call that one contractor during a particular storm because they may need bigger equipment and not small equipment. Also, what happens in the course of time is people do not answer the call when we call them. So they may be on the list, but if they're not available during that storm, then they may drop a couple notches in that call down. So think about what a storm is. It's an equipment, just a big exercise of getting the necessary equipment they need, matching it with staff, and taking care of business at hand. So that's sort of the background, but all good questions. Could it have been and could it be bid out in the future? Certainly. Where it is now, sort of developed over the course of time, and it works fine and was vetted, certainly with law and purchasing over the course of time to where it is now.
just
And-
chime in that our data team, VC Stat, is going to be looking at the routes themselves after this particular winter. It's on their projects list. So I think you know, if there's a change to be had, we're in a moment of trying to do some assessment on the front end.
Yeah, and I concur with Steve. That is very good questions. And in the future, yeah, someone needs to take a look at how that should move going forward.
Okay, that's great. And so, and again, Ms. Butler, if you've got the time, we've got some time this morning. I'd like to continue because I think the questions are.
I am I'm all for the commission until 12 o'clock. I'm all yours.
You probably shouldn't have said that, but thank you. Okay, why don't we move then to contract administration?
Okay.
Are there any questions about contract administration from the commission per se, based on this slide?
I just, because it's not yet clear to me who's really administering the contract, or am I thinking that there's a contract administration portion and then there's a project or delivery order or work order administration that might be in the using agency, and then in the contract part of the administration, is that process managed by purchasing, or is it higher up in the budget and finance office?
So the contract administration process, here is, of course, per contract, and the contract administrator is going to be the department. Whoever is assigned, whatever project manager is assigned to that contract. In the department will be the person who is going to, watch over and administer the contract throughout the contract term period.
Phil, it's Wade.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you went a little ahead of me. I just had a question with the on-call contracts and the, what do you call it, the master contracts. Just think of a situation where a company is going to install a heating, air conditioning, ventilating system in a county building, in a couple county buildings. And the equipment that's being put in, the only people that really can service this equipment are ones that are trained by the company who built this equipment. Would there be any, okay, so you might have a situation where you might have one vendor who can do that work. Let's say a couple other vendors learn from the company, what to do with this new equipment. Is there a process in place where the new companies that want to get in, that are qualified to service this equipment, where they can join in and be part of servicing that equipment?
So let me just go back a bit here, if you don't mind. So the HVAC equipment, which is managed by property management, they have done a, analysis and found that it would just be beneficial in the best interest of the county to make sure that all the HVAC systems throughout the county are the same. One, because, we can buy parts, we can store it, it's cost savings, etc. Now to, the questions about qualified, those vendors, when the solicitation comes up for renewal or to be rebid, then those new vendors that are certified, they can respond to that solicitation to be, considered in the bidding process to be awarded the contract.
And what time period are we talking about? Is it 3 times one time a year, or what is the time?
So most of our standard contracts are 1 year base term with 4-1 renewal options. So in that sense, if we were to exercise all 4 years, you're talking every 5 years.
But on the other hand, if we find out that there's a company that is qualified to service it and it's in the best interest of the county to consider changing, we don't necessarily have to exercise those renewal options.
Correct. And so that would definitely be something that the subject matter expert on the department level needs to convey to the purchasing department so we can take the action that Susan just mentioned.
Now, with the on-call contracts, I know some of them have a couple of vendors who've agreed to a payment schedule. How do you determine, let's say there's 2 or 3 vendors that are part of the on-call contract, how do you choose 1 or 2 of them to perform the work?
Now that should be provided for in the solicitation. So it depends on how that was written. We can either award by lowest responsive bidder, which means if we have 3 contractors, whichever one price is the lowest, we will go through them first. And if they can't do it, then we will move to the second one. We also, depending on the way the contract was written, we can do a rotation where it will be rotated amongst the contractors, but that's where that conversation with the subject matter experts and purchasing and and law all get together, and we need to figure out what is the best award method for that specific type of contract.
And then you look at the qualifications, and I mean, I assume that an all-call contract, that all of the vendors that are eligible are basically qualified equally.
It should be, yes. Especially if it's falling in pre-qualification, they all have to meet those same criteria.
Now,
but there may be situations where there's a specialized type of repair or type of work that has to be done, and not everybody on that list will meet that specific need.
And we do have language in the contracts to allow for that as well, if it's a special.
Have you spoken about the credit cards yet?
I have not. We haven't gotten to this
Yeah,
line.
I'll wait until we get there. Okay.
We'll get to that. Thank you. Going back to, and thanks for your question, Wayne. I'm sorry I didn't catch that you had a question about on-call before we moved on. On the contract administration, the contract administrator that you described, Ms. Butler, I'm looking at the slide. It says that the administrator, among other things, will inspect and evaluate progress by the contractor. Is that the intervals between such checking on the progress, reports about the progress, is that left up to the discretion of the contract administrator, or is there some sort of a reporting mechanism or spreadsheet or something else that one could look at to say, for this contract now in its 2nd year, there's been a check and a confirmation that all's going the way it should be every 3 months or 6 months?
So that is solely left up to the department with whomever they have identified as the project manager. We definitely don't have the staff internally to handle that type of overseeing of the contract. So I know some departments, they do have their own internal checklists or checks and balances of how they oversee the contracts. But in concept, they are the ones that are going on site, looking and making sure that the contractor is doing things in accordance with the scope of services that we provide for in the contract. If there are any discrepancies or any disputes, that's when the contract administrator will come to purchasing, and then we will take the measures that we need to take to resolve those issues.
That's very helpful. And I'd be interested to know which departments or groups have something a little more formal set up in terms of how they monitor, how the contract administrator monitors what's going on. And I'd like to know what that list is, and like to see a sample or two of how that's done.
Yeah, I would
I think
probably
it's
say
important.
we can reach out, maybe Jasmine to property management. I mean, I know they have a ton of project managers over there, and I'm sure they oversee all kinds of these on-call contracts. So they
And I believe that the health department and maybe housing may have, I know they get periodic reports from some of their vendors and probably OIT as well. So they may have, I don't know if they have written policies, but
they may have.
Phil, if I may
Yes.
jump in, there are 2 on-call contracts on the current agenda for the county council to approve at their next legislative meeting on Monday. One is with Canon Solutions for rental, maintenance, and supplies of digital copiers throughout the county. And it's a $5.2 million contract for 9 years. The second one on the agenda is with United Rentals. It's for, the first one was for Office of Information Technology. The second one is for Recreation and Parks with United Rentals for toilet rentals and servicing. And that is a $600,000 contract for a 5-year and 4-month term. Just point of information.
On call, that raises a question for me. On those on call, the dollar values that are approved are ceilings, correct? And
Yes, and as Sue mentioned, they are up for renewal on an annual basis.
So again, let me ask a question. With the on-call contracts, is there the opportunity for another company that has gotten the training, met the requirements to provide the service to jump on a on-call contract?
not necessarily, because you don't want to get into a contract dispute with a current vendor saying, hey, you know, I bid on this contract and now you're taking it away from me. But
Well,
there are, you know,
yeah.
we look at the opportunities to solicit again. So for example, if you were talking about, say, the carrier maintenance, we have, say we have carrier HVAC systems, but other companies have been awarded, or gotten certifications to repair it, we may put it back out to bid at the end, near the end of a contract year, rather than exercise a renewal. But we wouldn't want to jeopardize our current contractors and have them say, you've been unfair to me because now you're, you know, now that I have a contract, you're looking to cut me. So,
Two quick points, if I can. One is, since Peter mentioned the copying machine contract, in 10.2.312C of the code, it requires two-sided copying as much as possible. So I hope that's in there. But my question related to this topic we're going on has to do with 10-2.201. There's an authority to establish a purchasing committee, and it goes into details about that. Does that committee exist? Does it keep minutes? Can we see the minutes? And does that relate to any of this contract administration issue?
So I will have to check on that, Dan, if you don't mind. I don't want to say, and I have to check with the OIT department because they manage that contract and see if they have, you know, meeting minutes and stuff that they keep.
I don't think there is to your question, I don't think there is currently a purchasing committee. I think that's
Okay.
from many years ago. And I don't think, at least since I've been with the county, I don't recall them having.
That's fine. I mean, I sent in a number of code comments, and that was one of them. And if this thing exists, then let's use it. And if it doesn't exist, let's get rid of it. But it's in the code. And the two-sided copying, I'm also quoting right here from the code. So that ought to be in the contract for the copier. And
I do know, you know, from personal experience, the copiers that we've had have that capability. How often, whether people actually do it the way they're supposed to, I can't answer, but
Yeah.
the copiers do have that capability.
Yeah, it's there. And like
Okay.
Susan said, it could be
You can
turned on and off. And I didn't, and I'm thank you for that, Susan, because since I've been here, I haven't seen those committees either, but I didn't want to speak out of content. I wanted to double check
I don't think we
before I
have
say no.
couple.
Yeah. But if you don't mind, Dan, I would definitely would like to still, reach out to OIT just to be sure that that committee doesn't exist.
All right. Thank you on both.
The more information, the better. Anything else on on-call or contract administration? Because I think the next slide up is non-competitive procurement methods, emergency, sole source, and Charter Section 902F. I know there will be some questions about that. So can we move forward there? Everybody good? Okay, so non-competitive procurement methods, emergency, sole source, check Charter Section 902F. Questions?
One of the questions that I have on emergency contracts, I know that during COVID, we had reached out to a couple agencies in reference to some MBEs that was trying to do some work in Baltimore County. And I asked somebody within procurement about PPEs and some other things. And they said, well, we've already, because it was an emergency contract, we already have contractors really didn't put out for bid. And it seems like through COVID, that's kind of been the excuse that we didn't put out for bid because we already had a contractor or two and we didn't need to because it was an emergency. And so when we look at this whole process, when it ends up, I think that there are some companies that are gonna, benefit greatly from COVID and what was needed versus some really vulnerable companies that could have also benefited that weren't part of that, particularly MBEs and WBEs.
So when it comes to the emergency and COVID, outside of what I normally do, I'm heading the logistics part of the COVID team. And within that team, I have two buyers, and I have Carla Tucker, who is, oversees our MBE, WBE process. She is in, all of our, weekly meetings. And when we are procuring things, what Carla does for us, because we don't want to your point, we don't want to leave out the MBE, WBE community. So we send her the specifications and she sends that out through her Black email to vendors, asking them if they have these PPEs available. And that's part of our emergency, routine. When it comes to that, for example, we actually we have a certified MBE WBE vendor who is handling the lunches at the clinics. We have another one, actually this is a recent one, where we are looking for a vendor to provide water and Gatorade and deliver it to the different clinics every 2 weeks. And so we're working with MBE, WBE vendors to get that service up and going. So we do, have a good communication with our internal office and trying to push some of those opportunities through that channel, so that we can make sure that we are meeting, our MBE and WBE goals, even in the case of an emergency.
Rose, in it may have been in the last version of your slides, but there was a slide that elaborates on some of the points that you've just made that's titled COVID purchases. So I happen to keep my slides from last week, so.
Oh, was it not in this new one? I'm sorry.
It's in there.
Okay, thank you.
The chair in his discretion sort of went on from it simply because
no problem. Thank you very much.
Cover that. Yeah,
no problem.
It's certainly in there. It's certainly in there. I had a question about sole source and then this charter section 902F. What is the difference in terms of what's being procured?
So the sole source is pretty much is only one supplier, only, one source for this particular product, or service. The charter 902F means that it may not, this vendor may not be the only one that may provide it, but it may be something that they have in addition to, or an additional feature or function that is unique and in the best interest of the county.
And thank you. And then in terms of unsolicited proposals, so to speak, so a vendor who believes that it falls into either a sole source or a 902F category wants to bring something to the county's attention, how is that done, and is that permitted, number one, and number two, how is that done?
So do get departments who bring us vendors, so yes, we get those type of requests, but what we purchasing in law, we work hand in hand with looking at those inquiries and seeing if it falls within those guidelines. And Susan's on the call, so we've definitely turned back departments who thought that it may fall within a non-competitive procurement, and it did not. So we have this justification template that Laura and Susan and I created, I want to say back in 2016, because we wanted to hone in on this specific, situation or these non-procurements. We wanted to make sure that what you just described and didn't happen. So in essence, when we meet with the department, if they cannot prove and they cannot answer those questions, then it's not going to be deemed non-competitive, and they're going to have to go through the solicitation process.
I'm glad to hear that too, because I have an anecdote from about 20 years ago of MWBE that was bidding on glass replacement, window replacement, and the specification for the windows, of which there are many options, were designed in such a way you had to be a glass window expert to know that it really only went to one company.
Oh wow!
So it didn't look like a sole source contract, but the specifications were so precise as to the nature of the windows that this MWBE was left out. So sometimes these things can be very subtle. I only know this story because the person shared it with me when I was in the legislature, but you have to be careful of some of those kinds of things too. I doubt that those are still going on, but when you get into really detailed specifications of things, sometimes it can be constructed in a way that eliminates some in an unfair way. And in this case, different kinds of windows would have worked fine.
That's
great.
great.
And one of my other roles is to serve as counsel to the Ethics Commission. And there is a provision in the ethics law that says that if someone helps to write the specifications, then they cannot bid and they cannot assist anyone else in submitting a bid. So we are very cognizant of that.
Yeah, that wasn't the case in this particular thing. It was just somehow specified in such a way that it was so narrow that only one company could.
Which probably
let's move on.
Yeah, somebody probably did steer that, and we do try to look for that kind of.
Thank you.
Thing. Sure.
That raises a question, Dan. Thank you, because I'm actually looking at a procurement in Baltimore City currently for a client, which specifies make and model of a particular garment for a police department. Probably already said too much, but anyway, how do we handle? And it's a natural thing, right? If we've been using a particular product for a very long period of time, and we've had that relationship, how do we handle those situations to make sure, as Dan suggested, that we are not restricting competition?
Well, Rose and I do a training fairly often. I think we're a little behind in doing them with the people who do procurements. And one of the things that we talk about is how to write a specification, because the devil's in the details. And a lot of times we will say, for example, for uniform, there's a certain type of stitching they want. And we say, or equivalent So that gives the vendors an opportunity to say, I don't exactly do it this way, but my way works just as well. Am I correct, Rose?
No, you're absolutely correct. And if I can just add to something that Mr. Phillips said is, as you mentioned, sometimes doing things, the same way for a long time, it takes, some change management. So back to Susan's point, we do have the training and we do, sit down and talk with the departments, and we have to get them or pretty much help them understand why we can't, restrict, competition, and give them the whole big picture of what that can cause, for the county if, you go down that route. So with the training and those one-on-one, meetings with departments as things come up, that's how we kind of deal with, zoning in and making sure that that stuff doesn't happen.
Do you rotate out your, procurement folks, your purchasing folks?
We in the past, I don't think they did, but now we do a lot of cross training. The year before last, I've actually devised what I call teams. So we have 2 staff buyers and 1 associate buyer assigned to one team. And what that allows for is if anyone is out of the office on vacation, they are to stay in communications with each other, and the procurements don't kind of stay and get bottlenecked. And as well, it allows the associate buyer to have some on-the-job training. Actually, we are actually working on right now as we speak, rotating it again, so that people become more familiar. So I'm not sure what they did in the past, but I do know within the last 4 years we have been rotating commodities.
Any other questions on emergency sole source or section 902F? And the good news is if any of us think of a question after the meeting or later, we can always submit it. And as you can see, we're getting a lot of help and good answers and offers to run down information. So that's great. If there aren't any other questions, I'll pause for a second. Then let's go to other procurement methods, cooperative purchasing, and piggybacking. Again, we've got a very helpful slide, and I think most of the commissioners are familiar with the.
Yeah, so this is one I've been waiting for. So
I thought I might get a question.
Yeah. So this is one I've been bringing up for a long time, and I just have to hope my frustration doesn't come out. But House Bill 1400 of 2018, my bill, passed unanimously, signed by Governor Hogan. It built on purchasing procurement for health insurance for employees, and allowed counties and schools to piggyback onto the state. For those who have been state employees, Wade may remember, and maybe others, PETA, that you got pretty good health insurance. And among other things that this bill, besides enabling that kind of purchasing, could put together a work group. The study group is also looking at helping nonprofits, because there are actually 2 nonprofits that buy health insurance through the state, Maryland Legal Aid and Maryland Crime Victim Resource. And so it went through a whole analysis. So the bill was supported by everybody. The work group showed that, in fact, huge savings are available if the county couldn't help nonprofits, but we can certainly help local government. And MACO supported the bill, Teachers Union supported the bill, and so on. What it requires is actually diligent work. You got to sit down and look at the state health insurance program, which is tedious, and analyze all the costs and benefits. And then you got to look at the county program. But this is being done in about 12 to 14 other states and more all the time. They are saving money. If you're buying health insurance for 80,000 people, as the state does, and then you got 24 jurisdictions and 24 school systems separately buying health insurance, they're just not getting the same good deal. Additionally, it was shown that there's about a 4 or 5% administrative cost reduction, because now if a county were to piggyback with the state, they pay a state the small fee, but it's lower than what it costs for them to maintain purchasing health insurance. And, the last couple of slides, a couple of weeks ago, as I referred to the Office of Law, this has been for going on to 3 years. And yet get no traction from the county to actually do the detailed legwork to figure this out. Health insurance is one of the biggest purchases that the county makes. It's really essential. It's key to the health and well-being of the employees. And you can have the schools piggyback on it as well. And there's an opportunity here to save money. And you'd have to sit down, go through the T's, and then work through the stakeholders, the police and the unions and the fire and all that stuff. But common sense tells you the bigger the pool, the more money you're going to save. That's just common sense. And this just needs to have to do the actual gritty legwork, and to shoveling. It's just felt been shifted from person to person. I brought it up to Stacy Rogers, others, and said, we're going to look at it. We're going to look at it. That was a year ago. As far as I can tell, it hasn't been looked at. And, it's tens of millions of dollars. You don't have to save a lot. Save 1%. You saved a lot of money. So I'm sorry I'm sounding a little frustrated. I apologize. But I really would like someone to dig into the specific details of that. The law is enabled. It's all been done. Just going to require some specific, detailed analysis, which I will be happy to help in, and maybe others would too. So that's my point.
And you didn't sound frustrated at all, Dan. Don't even worry about it.
Okay. All right.
That was fine. I mean, again, we do have the cooperative purchasing, procurement method, but as you mentioned, it definitely is going to take a team to detail in, and that's something that is going to have to be done at a higher up
well, I'm asking all of you to bring it back to the higher ups and formulate that team. It definitely will take detailed work. It's going to take columns showing benefit choices and Kaiser and Care First and all that United Health, all that stuff, all the way up and down. But in the end, look at that state health insurance. It's the best health insurance there is. And also, if you get into the retirees that the county is carrying, it's even more substantial potential savings and giving. And this is what the study showed, and this is what goes on in the states. They get better coverage for their employees for less money. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is a process, but I would ask very strongly that somebody initiate that process, get the stakeholders in the room, and I'll be happy to participate, and maybe others on this panel will too. But it's a great opportunity. There's no laws or anything that needs to happen. It's all done. You just need to roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Yeah. So I don't
Mr.
know.
Chairman?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, please.
Dan, two things. I'd appreciate if you would share the legislation because I was not in state service at the time.
It's HB 1400 from 2008, and I will send the work 2018. I'm sorry, and it did pass 100% unanimously in the House and Senate. And I will send you the work group report as well for everybody.
Thanks.
I'll send it to Jasmine and Elizabeth, and they can circulate it, or I'll click all or something.
I'd appreciate that. But
Yeah,
and secondly, Dan, you mentioned, I think, 2 organizations that have gone through the process and are piggybacking on the state health contract?
Yeah, those are two nonprofits by statute, actually. But the work group went into that, and what the original bill I really want to do is allow any nonprofit to piggyback on the state purchasing, because we, give money to charities, all good charities. If they could, and using Maryland Legal Aid as an example, if they couldn't provide really quality health insurance, they got a lot of lawyers working for lower salaries, so they give them really good health insurance. So
no other counties have piggybacked?
They're beginning to look at it, but I haven't kept track of all 24. There is some Eastern Shore buying consortiums, and there's some others, but this is my county. This is a big county. I'd like to see it happen here. The others will topple. The thing of the nonprofit, so ultimately the decision was it could conflict with the ERISA laws that would make the state like an insurer, too complicated, but the other one, the within government, is legal. That was the bottom line there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions about cooperative purchasing, piggybacking?
Mr. Chairman, Steve here.
Yes, Steve.
So yeah, I totally agree, and I think the leveraging a broader market would help everybody. So I think maybe ultimately a recommendation can go in the report that things that make sense to do like that or look into further, we should make that recommendation. Yeah, I think of electricity. I know I'm pretty sure the county buys electricity through BrickPack. I think diesel fuel might be the same way. So
Correct.
things like that, large commodities lend themselves well to those type purchases. So I agree with the comments you made, Dan. Thanks.
Yeah, this is in effect a large commodity. You know, you only got a few vendors anyways.
Right.
Wade was on the health insurance committee with me for many years, and he knows this topic well too.
That's great. Other questions on cooperative purchasing and piggybacking? Anyone? All right, shall we move to procurement cards? I don't know if any of the other commissioners were waiting for their procurement card to be issued to them, but I don't think they're coming. I haven't gotten mine yet.
Phil, I did get mine, but they put a lid of 100,000 on it, and I don't. But with procurement cards, the school system had them years ago. They started it. I was in the audit office at the time. We audited the program. There were many problems, but I think they've been resolved. Now the county has procurement cards, and our IG has taken a look at the program. And I think it might be beneficial to the commission to hear from our IG as to what her findings were regarding these procurement cards, to see if she has any suggestions on how we can make this work better and to tighten it up. In fact, I'll say the same thing about all the county agencies. She's been in a while. She's done a number of audits of various agencies. I think you've read some of her reports, and I think she has a great knowledge of areas where there are weaknesses that we can go in and recommend changes that will tighten the system. So I would just suggest we bring her in sometime in the future for her to give us some ideas of areas that she thinks would be beneficial to the county if we were to study it and possibly make recommendations for change.
Good idea. Others regarding procurement cards?
Is mine ready?
Yep, it's in the mail, Wade. It's in the mail.
And where is the sandwich you promised me this morning?
That's offline, sir. Offline. We'll talk about that later.
Let me go back to one other thing if I can, which is we promised a report about sustainability purchasing. And that's I think Steve Lafferty was supposed to do that. There is some section in the code 12312B about polystyrene. Again, that's from 2007, but it clearly indicated some sustainability. But I know Steve's now head of planning. I still would very much like to hear a sustainability presentation and some report on that.
Yeah, and that anticipates the next segment as soon as we've finished this one. But we will. Yeah, that's a definite target. Dan, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Steve here again. Quick question about this.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And this is a question for Rose. Rose, do any of your folks have a credential called a CPCP, which is Certified Purchasing Card Professional credential?
Yep, I'm aware of that, and no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about?
I will.
Here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Our one credit card administrator, she does, take, training, but she's not certified.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Problem.
Thank you. Anything else regarding procurement cards other than where Commissioner, or one commissioner's card is? All right, let's go to,
Hello.
Was there another question? Sorry.
I can't hear.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So the sort of last but not least is the slide on purchasing personnel. And from everything Ms. Butler and Ms. Dubin we've heard today and we know about anyway, there's an awful lot to be done. And I see there are titles with numbers next to them, but I'm wondering what whether you've got more people than you need or the right amount, or whether there's some need for additional resources. Peter's, among other commissioners, has pointed out this is something obviously that needs to be focused on by the commission, because you can have the greatest system in the world, and if you don't have enough people or the best trained and qualified people to run it, it won't work. So can you comment to us about staffing and challenges and getting the work done?
Absolutely. So next to these titles, the numbers represents how many folks we have in the purchasing department with that one title. So if I could just dial back to the first one, currently I'm the chief of purchasing and disbursements. So I just want to, make that clear that it's purchasing and disbursements, which is the accounts payable portion of paying for these contracts and invoices. So when it comes to the buyers, we have staff buyers, 6, 1 senior buyer, 3 associate buyers. And to be quite honest, there's definitely a mixed, we do have a lot of folks who are kind of closer to that retirement age. And so, but we don't have enough available pins to bring in, new people where we can, train them as, our more, our succession plan, works through its process. And as you can see, we have like over 50, departments, and our associate buyers, they normally do our routine stuff, the easy stuff that you can get in and out the door easily. But the staff buyers, even though with 6 of them, is definitely not enough staff. And it could be a situation where it's a combination of maybe when workday come along, we will be a little bit more efficient and, get away from some of this paper-driven, process. Looking back at the commodities again, but my major concern is the fact that even with all these changes, I have quite a good number of staff that's definitely within that 2-year retirement window. And what does that look like for purchasing in the long run, as we are trying to, implement, whatever recommendations come from the panel? That's going to be a bit of a challenge for me. The other thing is professional development. I have some, of the folks who, are just coming on board, some of my new hires within the last, 2 to 3 years that are definitely all for professional development. But then again, I have my more mature buyers who are within retirement, and, what's the whole point? And then also not having, or maybe we need to take a look at, some of these certifications, one that that Steve just mentioned, and kind of figuring out if we can get a budget for a bigger budget to withstand professional development for all the folks in this department. If I double check, and I want to say I wrote it down somewhere, but I only have a $5,700 budget for workshops for, a office of, 15 plus people. And anyone who has registered for a procurement, workshop, that's about $600 per workshop. So there's definitely not enough funds to, adequately send people to professional development, courses and be able to understand the trends in the procurement field. And of course, as I mentioned before, when we talked about the the contract administration, we definitely don't have, the personnel that can really focus on the master agreements and just making sure like that in between person. I believe Ms. Peter mentioned that in between person between the department and purchasing to really just make sure that this stuff is getting done, that the scope of services is being provided to us in a timely manner in order for us to do the procurement process. So in my opinion, we definitely probably need to get a few more people in here, to kind of connect some of those missing pieces that's going to make the purchasing process run a little smoother.
And if I can jump in as well, one of my bugaboos with the county is that we don't do succession planning very well. And fortunately, Rose has set up her team process, so I think that helps a bit. But when you have somebody who retires or somebody who leaves to get another job or whatever, a lot of times you're left without buyers who know how the agency works, what their issues are. And some of these procurements are extremely complicated. IT, for example, or police or fire. And so when you have a shortage of buyers with that knowledge, or the energy contracts, for example, it can be very devastating and very difficult for the county. So if there's a way to not only increase the number of buyers, but to hire people before the knowledgeable people retire out.
Correct.
That would be a.
So in the legislature, we used to joke that, first of all, we really appreciated all the people in purchasing, but we used to joke that no child when asked what they want to be when they grow up says a procurement officer.
Right.
We also did send recommendations to the University of Maryland, but here in Baltimore County, we could do it with Towson and the community colleges to create an academic program for this so that people could come out trained and that the career gets the status and credentials and authority that it deserves. And I know Wade will remember that there was a shortage of dental hygienists, and Community College of Baltimore County started a dental hygiene program, and it's turning out people to fill a employment void. And people who can work with direct caregivers will be another one that's going to be coming in health. I think we should consider writing a letter to our community colleges and Towson and any other academic institutions that we have connections with to say, why don't you look at starting a training program in this within your business school or some other school. We recognize that setting up an academic program takes time, money, and expertise, but we've always felt that, at least we had a lot of discussions in the Health and Government Operations Committee, that this field is so important and the people are so critical, and all the jobs you do, you're handling tens and millions and billions of dollars, but you should have the same, it should have the same status of credentialing and education that other fields with similar substantial responsibilities get. So I don't know that what we can do anything about it, this group, but maybe we can come to a collective recommendation that be explored.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, Dan. Thank you. And the commission.
Well, if I might say, I think that looking at the charge that we have, I hate to say this, but I don't really believe that we can get this all done in a fast manner. So I would hope that this commission would look at issues that are that pop up that need a solution, and then work on them. And when you're looking for to fix up a house or something, you fix the roof first, you see if it's leaking, the basement, those kinds of things. Well, with this, what I'd like to see us do, if we see severe problems, let's make recommendations on how those problems can be resolved. We talked to the IG to see what she thinks we can do to tighten up the system. And I think it's going to take some time, but I think when all is said and done, it's going to save the taxpayers a lot of money, and we're going to have a more efficient and effective system.
Thank you. And Mr. Wade, and to your point with the IG office, when you mentioned their report on procurement card, we only have one procurement card purchasing coordinator. There's no backup. It's just one person. So I just kind of wanted, to point that out, that while they are, zoning in on how to tighten up the system, we only have one person that has that historical, knowledge.
Sometimes it's worthwhile to invest more resources into areas like this, because ultimately it could save money.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, you told me you were going to buy me an expensive suit.
Oh, no, sir.
With your procurement card. I'm waiting. Okay.
One of my goals as a chair of this wonderful collection of people is to avoid having the IG look into the commission. So we're not going to be buying suits or sandwiches or anything else. Mindful of the time, it's 11:25, and Ms. Butler, we really appreciate your time in responding to questions. We will stop at noon, and I really do want time for the commissioners to discuss what we've heard, and we've got a couple other things we'll be hearing about. So I am going to say thank you on behalf of the commission to Ms. Butler. My guess is we will ask you to be back again, because as we proceed, we'll have more questions, but we really appreciate your assistance and cooperation. With that, then let's go to the third item on the agenda, which is commission business. There are two things. There's an efficiency audit and a disparity study. Both of these.
I'm sorry. Do I disconnect now? I just want to make sure. Do I drop off now, Mr. Andrew?
You may.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks again. Appreciate it. Efficiency audit. I'm sorry. We start over again. Sorry, it's been a long week. Efficiency audit, disparity study. Elizabeth, did you want to describe those, where those are, how there might be some overlap with what we're doing, what the timetable would be, and
I would like to start with the disparity study and then pull up slides quickly on the efficiency audit. As we've been promising, at the next meeting on March 11th, we will devote the entire time to the discussion of MBEs, WBEs, and a disparity study that's been in the works for some time and will be released more or less on the eve of the meeting, because it is an open meeting and we're mindful of that. So you will be hearing from our County Administrative Officer, Stacy Rogers, and the consultant who prepared the report. We are also pulling some updated data because the report only went to 2018, but some of the more recent data, which I think overlaps with some of the asks early on, will all be presented at that meeting. I don't want to suggest it's the first and then the last conversation around this topic, but in consultation with Stacy Rogers, we want to give a picture of what we know to date about the county's history on MBE and WBE engagement and contracts, etc. And then I no doubt there will be a robust discussion, and I would think follow-on discussions as well. So that will be the, I think, full agenda for March 11th. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay. Now I am going to look for my PowerPoint. I forgot to call it up.
Well, before you get to that, I want to bring up another topic that may or may not fit into what you're going to say, but I'll get it in now. When the first meeting, we were given access to the purchasing manual and the code. PETA sent in some extensive comments about the purchasing manual. I think I had a couple. I sent in some comments about the code. I don't know if PETA's gotten a specific line-by-line response to her analysis. I know I haven't gotten a line by line response to what I sent in about the code. And, you know, those are our, you know, core documents that monitor everything. And at some point, I think we both deserve, and the whole commission deserves, you know, a response. Some of the ideas that I suggested, I know may make no sense, but others I think are worthwhile. But even the whole thing of a purchasing committee, which is in the code, is, you know, apparently not necessary, but there it is. Sexual orientation is not listed in the discrimination categories. Maybe it should be by now. You know, and there's not much stuff in there about any ADA or disability access, which may be covered by state law or federal law, but in any case, our code doesn't reflect that. So I'd really appreciate if someone would take a look at those comments. We spent time, I know I did, and it wasn't easy to read through a code. And it wasn't easy, I expect, for PETA to read through her comments, but those deserve a response after 3 months.
Well, if I recall, we were going to embed some of the responses into the presentations. I think some things have been addressed. If there is an interest, and I defer to Phil in having, you know, written responses, we can certainly do that. I defer to the commission about how you want to handle embedding specific responses to specific things.
Well, it doesn't have to be written, but I think that, you know, point by point, that these are the documents that govern how the county operates. And if they could be improved or updated, then they should be. And ultimately, it's going to have to be written, because those are the working documents. These aren't just concepts or theories. They're the working documents.
Yeah, my suggestion on that, just because there is, I'm just talking about resources for purchasing, there's tremendous burden on staff. But I do think, to answer your question, Dan, and also this was asked on behalf of PETA, I do think we need to nail down what the responses are to the things you've raised about both those documents. I think that's perfect for a subcommittee, because I appreciate Elizabeth's comments of some of the things have been responded to, but purchasing committee is a perfect example, just because it's recent. As first I've heard, there really isn't a purchasing committee. So I think that about a subcommittee can sort of figure out what we know, what we're still waiting to hear about, because our recommendations are going to have to address both those documents and where the deficiencies are. So, but anyway, let's go. Just to keep in order, let's go to the efficiency audit, and then we'll get to the subcommittee question. You're muted, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you're muted.
I was trying to, Jasmine, I hopefully can pull it up, because I couldn't figure out how to do it. But bottom line, and Councilman's familiar with this contract, we, the county executive, since really his first day in office, has wanted to undertake an audit. It's really more of an assessment, but to look for fiscal savings and operational efficiencies across county government, as well as the Baltimore County public school system. So we did a procurement process in conjunction with BCPS. And after receiving 13 proposals and doing 5 interviews, we chose a firm known as Public Works LLC. The contract was approved by council a week ago on the 16th or so, and we have just launched the project. It will include, here we go. It will include a review of its enterprise-wide as to county government. As I said, also the Baltimore County public school system. It was not just the county executive's intent to conduct such an assessment initially, but also was flagged in our Commission on Fiscal Sustainability report, and is a specific goal and strategy under the strategic plan. So Jasmine, if you could go to the next slide. Keep going on, that's the procurement part. So this firm has their team are people who've worked in state and local government as well as public school systems. So they are going to have 22 plus people working department by department and try to complete, well, the contract has them completing the work within 6 months. And it has been my intent that as they look at the purchasing department, sort of from the angle, well, they take an angle very much reflective of some of the questions, particularly around staffing and training and other things. They would be prepared to present both that as well as some of the benchmarking that I know the commission is interested in, certainly within the time frame of the commission's work. I don't think they would be ready to present before May or June, but I do think, and I've asked them, they've just started, so they don't have a full sense of how far they're going to get. But we can certainly expect that over the summer, if not sooner, they would be prepared to present some initial findings as well as some benchmarking best practices to the commission. And this is who they are, and then maybe go to the next slide. I think there's a slide here about how they're going to go about their work. This is where they've worked. Yeah, so they're going to look through, they're going to look at existing information. They're primarily looking at opportunities for savings, but at the same time, it's going to inevitably involve looking at how operations function. And I think some of the questions even today about the purchasing department, who does it, how we do it, where we need to train up, cross-train, some of those things are likely to come up in their assessment. Not to mention some of the on-call and piggyback structures that were also flagged today. So it's just an added information source, but they will have done an investigation of sorts that we as county staff will never have the time or really the expertise to present the way I hope they will. So that's really all I wanted to share on this project.
Question, Elizabeth, you had schools listed in the opening slide. So is this part of this BCPS as well undergoing?
Yes, I'm sorry, Delegate, yes. It's a joint project, which is to say that BCPS was part of the procurement and their kickoff for the project is this Friday. And yes, there will be a similar assessment of BCPS.
Good. Thank you. All right, let's jump to the subcommittee piece because I really want to make sure we address what else needs to be done. The thought and mentioned by a number of you, I know Dan in particular, but in the conversations I've had with everybody since the last meeting, I have shared my I guess focus on the fact that we have an interim report due May 31st and a lot to pull together before then. And I do think we will need to meet more often, but I'll hold that. It's a little later down in this agenda item. But one of the thoughts expressed by a number of commissioners is some of these subjects really can use a little more focus and some follow-up in between meetings. When the entire commission meets, of course, we are subject to the Open Meetings Act. Subcommittees of less than the whole commission are a little freer in terms of scheduling and operation and the like. And of course, those committees will come back and report to the full commission in a public meeting. When I raised the question about logistics for subcommittees with Elizabeth and Jasmine, the concern they expressed was wanted to be helpful and just being concerned that just in terms of county resources, trying to assign someone within the county to each subcommittee. And that sounds great. And some of that will be temporal. Maybe when General Assembly session is over, there'll be more people available. But I was really hoping a lot of this could be done by commissioners on their own with a little bit of backup or coordination as needed from county folks. It could be questions to the councilman's suggestion, maybe questions to the IG on something, or going back to Ms. Butler with follow-up, or as Yogi Berra used to say, deeper depth questions or thoughts as we learn more about it. So as I'm talking to everybody, I put together a list, and I think these are my suggestions. I'd be delighted to have others, and maybe they don't need to be going on all at the same time, but I'll just start with one that Steve Walsh volunteered himself, and he also volunteered Pete, his fellow commissioner, look at construction. I think there would be, it would be appropriate to have a subcommittee looks at the whole piggyback cooperative purchasing question. I think sustainability is another subcommittee that would make sense to look at to have. In talking to Commissioner Benetti, Rick suggested workforce and equity committee. I would expect that after our meeting next week, given the number of conversations I've had about with commissioners about minority business enterprises and DBE and other small business and other entities that want and deserve to do business with the state. And then the last one, which just occurred to me during the meeting, is went on documents to look at the county code and the like that actually govern how things work. I don't know that all 6 of these have to occur at the same time. There may be other suggestions. I'd love to have them. Then we ought to talk about how to populate them. I'm just concerned that it's terrific to converse with you all. This is a commission that has a lot of experience in what I would call horsepower, but I don't think we have the luxury of meeting once a week or every 3 days. And there's a lot of things that deserve a little deeper attention that I think the entire commission could benefit from with the use of subcommittees. So I don't know if anyone has any disagreement with that or any suggestions of other subcommittees, but that was my thought.
I think subcommittees are a very good idea. I think it'll really be a good idea if somehow we can meet in person. So let's say you have a subcommittee of 4 people. I've gotten my COVID shot. I don't know who else has gotten the COVID shot. Okay, 2 of us. And I just, if the meetings are held a month from now, as long as people don't feel concerned about meeting, like 4 people meeting on these subjects face to face, taking the necessary precautions, I think that's going to be the most effective and efficient way to move forward. These meetings online definitely have something missing, and what's missing is it's not the face-to-face. It's not talking to one another. It's very impersonal, and I think we need to work together. The subcommittee is a group, and I'm proposing, unless people think it's too dangerous, that we have these subcommittees meet in person. We could have 4 people on the subcommittee and sit on 4 different ends of a table, so we're not too close to one another. So I'm curious as to what you think about that. It might be a situation where one subcommittee doesn't feel comfortable meeting that way and another will feel comfortable. But I do think we need to leave those decisions to the participants in each subcommittee.
No, I think that makes sense. And my fervent hope is that we will all be able, that this commission will be able to meet as a group in person as soon as possible. Elizabeth, to her everlasting credit, has been working on that. We've been thinking about that. We'll just have to see. Any other thoughts on the subcommittees? I mean, is anybody? Yes, Peter, please. I think you're muted.
Thank you. I agree with Wade as to the advantages, but I think it's premature, and I don't think we can wait for people to get vaccinated. And younger people aren't going to be vaccinated until summer, if they're lucky. My first shot is scheduled for tomorrow, but then it's going to be another month before I get a second shot, and you're supposed to wait for 2 weeks after that, and you're only supposed to be really meeting as we would normally think of meeting in the old days, with people who are likewise vaccinated. So it's not ideal, but I don't think we have any choice. I certainly am not prepared to meet with even small groups at this point. If not, until everybody's vaccinated, I just think it's premature.
Well, I got the shot yesterday. No reaction to it. I did lose my arm.
You will have, like, most people likely have a reaction after their second shot, typically about 24 to 36 hours. But I do personally have a Zoom channel, maybe others do. And so if I'm involved with any subcommittees, I can arrange Zoom for whatever group. And I personally am willing to be on documents and piggybacking and sustainability if necessary. But I'd like the sustainability report first so we can know what we're working with.
No, that's
my commitment.
Thank you.
For those who are interested.
Great. Yes, that's great. Again, in the interest of time, how about if I circulate a list of these committees, see who would like, we've got some volunteers already, see who would like to be on what list, and we'll take it from there. And then the folks can figure out, should we meet, when should we meet? The group that looks at the MBE issues, for example, may want to wait till after our March meeting and see, where things go. Dan, you're absolutely right on sustainability, and other things may pop up. We'll go ahead and get that on the way. Thank you.
Phil, I would like to hear from our IG as soon as possible. The county IG, because I think she is going to play a role in this, in that I'm sure that she has identified areas that do need improvement, and I think we will benefit from her. So whenever you can fit her in, that would be great.
Well, that's a perfect segue into one of the other commission business bullet points, which is other information sources, public input, outside stakeholders. We've had conversations about getting information from outside the county, those who do business with the county, those who would like to do business with the county, others who have looked at county procurement practices, and of course, particularly best practices, which is something that I'm hoping we can have a presentation on in April or May, hopefully April. One of the things that's come up, of course, is that those who do business with the county presently or who would like to might be a little reluctant to offer public criticisms. And there have been some suggestions about perhaps those commissioners who are connected with organizations could ask some of their members to submit what would be anonymous but reliable accounts of what their experience has been and what their concerns are and what their wish list might be for Baltimore County procurement. There's also a question, and I don't know if we have to decide this one today, about just sort of general public input. But people have ideas about other sources, other places we could get information, or the like.
We do have, if I recall, we do have our own commission email address. And I think it would be good to have the public have at least an opportunity to weigh in a way that they would know that the commissioners would be seeing what they have to say. And that might be more manageable than having, a call-in session for the public, for example, for some of the reasons that you indicate, and it could be very time-consuming. But I do think it would be good for our own information to get that kind of input, and also it would say to the world that this is a process that is honest, interested in transparency, and interested in what people have to say, as well as a bunch of us who some could say we're all insiders. You know what I'm saying?
So if I could, Phil.
Yes, please.
I know it may be a challenge to do a public testimony, so to speak. But given all of my years sitting on the planning board, I will tell you, people feel far more engaged when they have the opportunity to speak their own mind. So we may want to, that doesn't necessarily need to come immediately, but at some point, particularly along the lines of the MBE, WBE set of issues, it may be, there may be a more feeling of transparency, even if it's only for one evening, right? So I would think about that.
Absolutely.
Phil?
Steve. Yes, Steve.
I would think also we might want to consider getting some feedback from county staff who use the procurement office. Again, anonymous, nobody wants to badmouth the coworkers, but they may have some perspectives as well on what they think works and what doesn't work.
Okay, good idea. Good idea.
Good idea.
Others?
Chambers of Commerce could be useful. And I have a question you don't have to answer now for those who know more about MBE, but is surety bonding still an issue for a lot of MWBEs? Having a surety bond, can't get the bond without the contract, can't get the experience till you get the bond, and the yin and yang of that. And that's something that can be mentioned in the MBE presentation. I'd like to get an update on surety bonding issues if they're still problematic.
Still an issue.
Yep.
Still an issue. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Good. All right. Well, if you any of us think of other information sources, but we'll talk to Elizabeth and Jasmine. We'll get that lined up. I think the email is a great idea, but I hear you, Scott, on the public having the public engagement, and I expect that will be in the cards. So last thing I had, and we have a few minutes left here, is sort of future meeting planning, topics, speakers, logistics. I wish that I were a better chair. If I were, I would present you all with a list of every meeting date with a lineup of speakers and all materials, and you'd have that from now till the end of November. But as all of you have, I'm sure, already determined, I'm afraid I can't do that. I wish I could. We are trying to give as much advance notice as we can. Again, a lot of this is we started up. We would be hearing from county folks, as we've all discussed. I think there's a clear need now to expand our information sources, and we will do that, obviously. We do have the MBE presentation for the March 11 meeting. I would very much like to get the best practices folks in soon, and I want to pursue the Inspector General piece as well, and follow up on some of these other suggestions here. So it is, I'm going to do my level best to forecast going ahead so we all know what to expect. And we're trying as hard as we can to get documents out a little sooner. I think with the PowerPoint piece, the PowerPoints, I think we will all find very helpful to have as we sit down to write the reports, because things are organized. There's some general informational aspects to it. And then, of course, we have other informational sources and other questions, other documents and things that we will compare against the PowerPoint to be sure we've got the best predicate for our information for our report. But I think all of us agree that it's best if we can have the PowerPoints in advance and read them and then be prepared with questions, because I think that's the most efficient use of everybody's time. And the last logistics thing I had, a couple of people I've talked to about this, we have these 10 a.m. meetings, and I apologize, Elizabeth and Jasmine, because I haven't discussed it with you, but a number of commissioners and I have talked about, might there be a better time in the day to have these meetings, or is it okay with people if we have an occasional meeting in the afternoon? Didn't know what everybody's thoughts were about that.
I'm fine with the afternoon. Afternoon is fine.
Same here.
Afternoons will work for me as well.
And I'll just say, with enough notice, move things around, and the afternoons will be fine.
I'm with Scott.
Okay.
Enough notice.
Same here.
More
too.
notice is better notice.
Absolutely. And the other part of that too is that sometimes, and of course, all of us have, we're not all busy at all the same time, but I think everybody's pretty busy. Sometimes it's good to be able to have a morning to get through things and then get to mid-afternoon. You've got some things accomplished in a little clearer time. So that is all I have. It's 11:54. We've got 6 minutes left. If there's anything else that anybody wants to bring up or discuss, and I apologize if while the slide was up and someone wanted to ask a question, I didn't see it. Maybe the best thing to do is just use the chat function so I can see it, since I can't see everybody while the slide's up. Anyway, anything else anybody wants to bring up for the good of the order?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I was looking the other night at the executive order, and the executive order mentions property management and fleet management. And I know we haven't really talked about fleet management much. And I was just wondering if Elizabeth or anybody knows what, why that was put in there, and really if there's any focus for the commission in terms of fleet management.
So that, well, the county is looking actively at a fleet management redesign. We did an internal review, and the sufficiency audit will have that at the top of their list. I don't recall why it was put in the executive order, in that I don't recall there were specific procurement issues, but we do currently have a bifurcated situation and it needs to be looked at. I would recommend that we have the folks doing the efficiency audit provide an update on what they're finding sooner rather than later, and maybe identify any procurement related issues. So at least you can say you heard about it. And then maybe you'll have questions as well that are procurement related. So I think we should add that to a topic list midsummer when they've done some work. Does that help, Steve?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else for anybody? Okay, well, I will then go ahead and we'll adjourn a couple minutes early with my sincere thanks for everybody being available, and really have enjoyed talking to everybody and look forward to further conversations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.